Welcome to the SoccerWire podcast, the weekly show that focuses on the youth game and player development in the United States. Quinn Casteel, Charles Boehm, Chris Hummer, and producer Bridget Baker are still full from their Thanksgiving meals, and I haven't stopped eating, but we are back out on the pitch, as today we will discuss the professionalization of youth soccer. Did it start with the advent of the U.S. Soccer Development Academy, or does this evolution have further roots? It's December 4th, 2019, and the SoccerWire podcast is set for a holiday season kickoff. We kick off our 10th edition of the SoccerWire podcast with Managing Editor Quinn Casteel. Quinn, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was great, Mark. How was you look like you got pretty tan in Florida.
Yeah, it was rough, but it's not a bad place to have to go for Thanksgiving. Can you believe that we're now in a double digit of episodes?
Yes, I can actually.
Wow. I mean, usually when people hear a project with my name on it, they think like 1 or 2, but we've made it to 10. I'm very, very grateful for that. So, Quinn, what stories are you keeping tabs on this week?
Well, first of all, Mark, the U.S. women's national team is going to be kicking off a identification camp December 9th down in Bradenton, Florida. And that's going to be a great opportunity for some young prospects who are on the new head coach, Vlatko Andonovski's radar. And he's called in a lot of current college players and some very young NWSL players to see if they can earn a spot on some rosters for 2020.
Yeah, I think, that's going to be one of the toughest jobs for him is how do you begin to turn over this roster and search for the next generation of players to move this program forward while also keeping on the veterans who are not only continuing to perform, but have brought you so much success throughout the last 2 World Cups.
No, definitely. I think Vlatko is going to get a lot of buy-in, doing this because he's considering this camp kind of a reward for some of these young players who are definitely on his radar. And he's going to get, I think, a lot of buy-in just casting a wide net with this player pool. And
some of the players might not even be able to participate in this camp because they're still dealing with the College Cup, which is down to the quarterfinals on the men's side, and the women's Final Four is set.
Yes, the men's quarterfinals will be played this weekend. They're down to 8 teams. And every team that wins this weekend will be heading to Cary, North Carolina for the College Cup next weekend. And just out of the 8 teams still alive, you have one actually unseeded team, UC Santa Barbara, is still kicking. They're going to be playing against number 4 Wake Forest on Saturday.
And they may be unseeded, but let's not forget this team's pedigree. This is a team that has won the NCAA championship in the past. However, my money right now is on Georgetown. 10 goals in their last 2 games in the tournament, putting up 5 spots in their last 2 games. For me, I think they're the team that are going to go all the way. Who are the Final Four on the women's side?
On the women's side, we're already down to the College Cup this weekend. You have the semifinals taking place Friday, and then Sunday is going to be the title match on the women's side. All three games will be played in San Jose, California at Avaya Stadium. And the 4 teams still alive in the semis, we're going to have number 1 seed North Carolina going up against unseeded Washington State. And another number 1 seed, Stanford, is taking on number 2 seed UCLA. 3 out of the 4 College Cup teams in the women's side are Pac-12 sides, and they're playing that out in San Jose. So it's going to be very West Coast heavy in a year where the College Cup is out on the West Coast.
And I'm sure a lot of girls who will be watching this game right now in hopes of one day reaching that level are playing in the ECNL. Some of them are going to get the chance to impress some of these college coaches coming up, Quinn.
Yeah, this weekend is the ECNL's annual South Carolina Showcase down in Greer, South Carolina. And one of the big events happening during that showcase is another one of these ECNL national selection games, which really have been a big success so far. The idea for those was to play games under the lights in a showcase environment. And so, congratulations to all the players that have been selected from the U16 and U17 age groups to play in the big game this Friday during that showcase.
Quinn Casteel, ladies and gentlemen, he's the man who keeps SoccerWire fresh. To read these stories and more, be sure to log on to SoccerWire.com. Time now for a word from our sponsor, PlayerMaker, and when we return, Charles Boehm and Chris Hummer will join us to discuss the professionalization of youth soccer and youth sports in general. The SoccerWire podcast is brought to you by PlayerMaker, the lightweight device worn by soccer players on each foot to record every touch of the ball and every step. Within minutes of training or games, players and coaches get a report on every touch, including left and right foot usage, possessions, passing, and dozens more. PlayerMaker is the most holistic player performance approach that's never been seen before. Visit SoccerWire.com/PlayerMaker to schedule a demo. Welcome back to the SoccerWire podcast. I'm Marc Serber alongside Quinn Casteel, and joining us now is SoccerWire founder Chris Hummer and resident guest Charles Boehm. Mr. Boehm, what were you thankful for this Thanksgiving?
Wow, I've never been called a resident guest before. I feel like I need to get business cards made. That's fantastic.
I'm still waiting on mine. So.
That's an oxymoron, resident guest.
Yeah, it's good. No, but that's why I like it. That's good. It's got a little. It's a thought exercise.
Hey, you
know
keep
what?
wearing that pink forward. What team is that? Forward Madison jersey.
I'm repping the Mingos.
We'll keep inviting you
full
back.
Mingo. I'm gone full Mingo for this show today. Maybe if you guys are lucky, we'll throw up some photos on the social
tweet out
feeds.
that jersey. I love
for
it.
sure.
Mom, Dad, this is what I want for Hanukkah.
Really, this is a visibility exercise. When I biked here, I wanted to make sure nobody ran me over, so I put the pink on. So I'm thankful to work in soccer, as crazy as this game is, and we're going to delve into some of the most absurd forms of insanity that we encounter in this sport of ours. But I'm still feel very lucky to have a job like this, and to get to do stuff like this with a great crew here in the studio once a week.
Much appreciated. All right, well, enough with the sappy stuff. Sea Turkey, is the youth game professionalized? And if yes, what does that mean to you? And when did it become this way?
It's kind of a foul introduction you give me there, Mark.
Oh, well played.
But I'm going to roll with it. So this is a great topic. There's a lot. There's several hours worth of show here, right? So we're going to try and keep it focused for you guys. I want to thank everybody who answered me on Twitter. Yesterday I put out a call knowing we were going to talk about this. I wanted to get a little bit of crowdsourcing, see what the rank and files out there, at least the cross-section we get on social media, had to say. And I was deluged with some incredible stories, some frustrating ones, some ludicrous ones. Some people got in my DMs with very specific information about what sounds like possibly fraudulent activity happening at their local clubs. I want to thank you for that. We're going to change the names or leave the names off to protect both the innocent and the guilty in this show. But it really touched a nerve. I think that this topic boils down to the heart of a lot of what's not working. Maybe it's a little bit of what of good things that have happened in youth soccer in America in the last 10 or 20 years, but also a lot of kind of how the insanity that we so often find ourselves grousing about can unfold. So I wanted to start by just sharing some of what folks on Twitter shared with me. It's just to start with. Here's one, and I'm sure many of our listeners can relate to this. If I'm coaching a U9 team in the Boston area that is a pretty good standard, why do I need to drive to Maine for a 9 a.m. game on Sunday morning? It's not for better competition. The players hate it. Coach hates it. Parents hate it.
Can I just stop you right there? One thing is, if I were 9, I would hate the early wake up to have to do that. But I remember being a 9-year-old, and anytime we got to play games that were either like out of state or away, and a reminder that I wasn't doing the driving and everything, could sleep in the car. But I loved that. I felt like a pro. I felt like it meant something. So a lot of people are going to say the players hated it. I don't necessarily think they do. Just going back to my remembrances of a 9-year-old, and now I'm at the mental maturity of a 10-year-old. I can see it a bit differently. But as a 9-year-old, I don't know how much exactly the players hate it. But keep going, Chris.
Well, here's the thing. I know what you're referring to, and I think when it used to be that was a special occasion. You're hitting the road, or even if you're really lucky, getting on a plane to go to a big tournament, a showcase
Which then
event.
I really felt professional.
Traveling for a special events or special matches that had extra meaning. So yes, for sure. And I mean, I can think back to even most recently, college era. The conference road trips were huge. That feeling was great. But the problem is, I think a lot of people kids who are not necessarily at the topmost level of whatever pyramid they're on or whatever phase they're in of the game are traveling like that on the regular, just a normal weekend game.
So the answer for that, why they have to go at U9, is that there is absolutely no reason for it. I mean, the technical reason is that team, I don't know which one they are, plays for a club that signed a deal to be in a league that requires the U9 teams to go play probably the same schedule as a U17 team, where there might actually be a reason. So from a soccer perspective, and we try to focus on, shining the light on what makes soccer players better and soccer coaches better, there's literally no reason for a 9-year-old to have to drive more than an hour to a game unless you live in a really rural area. It's just ridiculous.
And I want to make clear, too, and trying to focus on the concept of professionalization here. We're not just talking about professionalism, which is where you expect that a coach or whatever, or service provider, whoever you're dealing with, shows up on time or early, provides what they say they will, does so in a professional, courteous manner, handles their business correctly. We're moving a step beyond that, which is the sphere, the jobs in this game, whether it's coaching, organization, technical director, whatever. There's a lot of jobs that were once done by mom and pop, by parent coaches or parent directors or volunteers, that over the last 20 years have become full-time gigs. Now, in a lot of ways, there's good things from a coach who's a full-time coach, right? Professionalized. They've had to go get their certifications, their licenses. They do continuing education. This is their specialty, so they should be better at it, right? Therefore, your kid should have a better experience. Your kid should improve at a more rapid rate, all those sorts of things. The feedback I'm getting is that it's not necessarily the case, because by professionalizing it, we've also made the economic factor the most dominant, most influential one. And therefore you have coaches who are, here's another one. My coach demands that we all show up 30 minutes early for our training sessions for my kids' team. Demands that we give 110% effort, that we put soccer before all other kids' activities. And yet that coach rolls in late to training, is fiddling around with their phone. The kids don't even touch a ball for the first 15 or 20 minutes of the session because the coach is farting around, or doesn't even have a clear session plan in place, or leaves early because they've got 4 other teams that they're coaching, because the grind, the fact that there's only X number of hours after school and work on a weeknight, there's only X number of hours to play a game on the weekend days, leaves these coaches hustling to pack in and to meet this really rigorous, really challenging financial model that is actually providing negative outcomes compared to when it was just a caring and maybe somewhat educated mom or dad running the session.
And let me say something about coaches and technical directors here, because first of all, for me, kind of working closely with a lot of coaches and a lot of technical directors, I see people who are so dedicated to their craft. I see guys who wake up at 6 a.m. and they are taking care of the administrative side of everything. They are taking care of learning new practices, new sessions, new plans, dealing with the parents, dealing with everything they have to go to. They're at the office from 6 a.m. to say about 3 p.m. Then they have to go out and coach 2 or 3 different teams, and they're there from 6:30 to 10:30, 11 at night, and they get home and they do it all over again. They are also paying out of their own pocket to go and get these licenses. They are trying to learn the best they can. And so I don't really think this comes down to the coaches and a lot to the technical directors, who I believe really do care. But when you're only being paid X amount of dollars, just for the sake of argument, say $8,000 per team, and you, of course, have to coach at least 4 or 5 teams to make things work, you're still only making $40,000 to be pulled in so many different directions for 14 to 15-hour days, and you're paying for a lot of stuff out of pocket, and at the end of the day, you're not getting the returns. And like Charles said, you're being stretched because you have to drive, say, 30 minutes from one practice to another in really bad traffic, which we know in many metropolitan areas is getting worse and worse. But on top of that, on game days, on weekends, you may have 4 to 5 different games that you have to be at, and they could be 1 to 3 hours apart, depending on where you live and where your teams are playing. So they're stretched very thin by this as well. So we may say things about coaches, technical directors, players too. This is not a knock on them necessarily, and it's not a knock on about 95% of people involved in this sport, but they are caught up in the way that things are happening, and I just wanted to make that very clear. Sorry for that tangent, Charles. Back to you.
No, and I want to emphasize that I can relate to coaches deeply because I'm living the 1099 life that most coaches are. Right, coaches are dominantly contractors. There's no benefits. You get a very basic pay package that doesn't come with any of the things that make life more livable. This is what it's like for journalists too in the modern landscape. I mean, I haven't had a W-2 job in like 10 years. I don't even know what benefits are, and that's, again, there's a limited amount of time. And it's all the opposite schedule from a normal 9 to 5, which takes its own sort of toll. So we definitely have empathy for the coaches, but again, once in this system where the economic model is what dominates, right? Our system was not set up to make the best players, and let's be honest, our at least on the men's side, our national team performances tend to show it, right? Our system is not efficient at identifying and cultivating elite players. It just isn't. And this is the $10,000 question that everybody's trying to answer. But right now, the system empowers those that have the funds, which is the parents. And then on the next level forward beyond that is that it empowers the coaches and the technical directors who are the most entrepreneurial, who are the hustlers or the sharks, depending on how you want to look at it, who are the best at manipulating and managing this model. I'm gonna read another one here. Chris, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, so many things to talk about there. I think it might be important to step back and say, what do we mean by professionalization? And you mentioned the difference between the two of, if you receive money to perform a task, you are in some ways by definition a professional. But being professional about what you're doing is I think more, we're talking about both here. And I think there are plenty of coaches and technical directors and so forth that are paid to do, and they're very good professionals. But there are also a lot of people that are calling themselves professionals that are far from actually acting in a professional manner and delivering services. So, and where this has come from, I think what you talked about before with the DA, this has become way before the DA, quote unquote, professionalize the sport, is the parents decided at some point, I guess in the 70s, to start paying people because they were the ones that were volunteering out on the fields. And these are the coaches that I had when I was, in my single digit years. And there's like, we really don't know what we're talking about. We see the game on PBS. The German game of the week was the only way you could watch soccer in the late 70s or early 80s. And they said, we don't know what we're doing. And this looks like a sport that the rest of the world is playing. And us Americans are horrible at the sport. So we better start paying people that at least seem like they know what they're doing. And that was a hit or miss. And that started a whole wave of a lot of our friends that coach in the world that have been here for 20, 30 years. And they still have a little hints of those accents because they came from soccer countries. And there's so many of them. They've had such a big influence on the game. But the professionalization, meaning we started paying people to coach this game, happened and continues to happen because parents are willing to pay the bill. Now, they may not be at fault because they still might not know what they don't know. And they are victims in the clubs and the coaches that are marketers, but not professionals. But they're looking to get that formula right. And they're willing to spend money on their kids like we do here to make sure, or at least hope, they have every opportunity. And it's just still hit or miss.
And Charles, I know that you had another tweet that you wanted to read, but we have to listen to a word from our sponsor, Player Maker. So we will do that, and we will continue this conversation when we come back here on the SoccerWire podcast. The SoccerWire podcast is brought to you by Player Maker, the ultimate performance product for soccer teams and players. Player Maker is already being used by the world's top Premier League clubs, championship college teams, and now available for the youth market on a subscription basis. The Player Maker system records every touch of the ball and every step, providing information for coaches and players such as total touches on the ball, right and left foot touches, possession times, distance covered, sprints, and passing completion, among many others. Player Maker data can help coaches at every level to plan their training sessions effectively. Every player receives feedback on their personal technical and physical training goals. For a demo of Player Maker, visit soccerwire.com/playermaker. Player Maker, fast track player development. Welcome back to the SoccerWire podcast. We want to thank everyone who's listened and commented on last week's show and encourage everyone to share, like, subscribe, and rate us, unless, of course, it's less than 5 stars. Also, feel free to reach out to us on email at news@soccerwire.com with news tips, comments, and your own college commitment news. And Charles, I know we wanted to get back to some more of your tweets as we're talking about the professionalization of youth soccer. But first, Quinn, you talked way too much in that last segment, but we are going to give you the first word of this segment regardless.
Yeah, that was my plan all along, Mark. Just listening to everything that was said in the last segment, I was just kind of thinking to myself, yes, there's going to be problem areas when it comes to professionalization and having coaches who are full-time youth soccer coaches. But at the same time, I think overall, I have to say it's kind of been a net benefit, having people who are close to being a professional versus having parents who don't really know what they're doing. I think one of the worst things that can happen in any youth sport is to have a parent coach miseducating players and players not learning the game, the proper technique and the proper way to think about the game.
My concern with that is that we've had this proliferation of premier elite travel, select, etc. Right? This idea that we the club or I the coach can provide you with a higher level. Your kid needs a higher level of competition and training, and I will provide that. Leave the rec environment behind. And the data shows, and this is across sports in America. This is a youth sports phenomenon beyond soccer, but soccer is probably the worst example. Rec is dying. Recreational leagues are dying, and there's kids that are paying money and traveling sometimes hours at a time for a glorified rec league game. And let's be honest, you go to some pretty significant regional tournaments and you look at the B or C brackets, and it's not a select level of play.
Amen to that. I mean, that's probably my biggest pet peeve with youth soccer is the traveling for glorified rec and not being honest about what level you're at and just the excessive travel and costs and things like that. But I would just simply from a coaching perspective, I do think professionalizing coaching is overall a good thing versus having a parent out there who doesn't know what they're doing. But I would like to hear talk more about
I also want to hear some more of these tweets.
My problem,
for sure.
Another problem here too is, again, we don't have a clear pathway that shows this coach and this club. Now, we have anecdotal evidence that certain clubs and coaches are good at growing players, passing the players on to the next level, improving them, right? We know that there are good actors, plenty of them. But is there a clear reward system and a pathway for not only the players but coaches to climb to subsequently higher levels? Because elite players are not necessarily the currency. The dominant currency is still currency in this elite game we're in. So therefore, then it becomes about not just are you best at growing players, but are you best at growing funds. Somebody DM me with this one. There's a local club where I live, blankety blank club. It's a significant one. Where the director makes, based on available 990 form, and that means it's a nonprofit club. We'll get into that later. About $115,000 a year. Not bad. About one of the $10 brought into the club goes to him. The board of directors has deep roots with the Good Old Boys Network, including former mayor and respected local college coach. They used to have a sweetheart contract with my town, giving them exclusive field rights at minimal cost. These quote-unquote professionals treated town rec staff so poorly, the contract wasn't renewed after 7 years. A new club was stood up where staff coach pay was more reasonable. With the help of an outside for-profit company, the big club came in, created a new league for this is talking about U8 to U12 that won't let the new club join. That means our club members and other rural and urban club members need to join one of those other clubs or travel farther and more often for games. For our second graders, second grade. So, and this is, again, we were talking about the travel earlier. Everybody, it's easy to convince yourself that my kid is traveling, has to travel because they're so good, right? We don't mean any disrespect to the kids or the teams, but in a lot of cases, your kid's traveling because there's a political chess match happening where a coach or TD is created an alliance with someone further down the road because they're in a pissing contest, let's be honest, with the local opposition that would be plenty good enough of a test for you on the field.
I think most of these problems could be served. You can think things visually. We all talk about pyramids. It's a player development pyramid. There's diagrams and all kinds of, player development stuff and federation white papers about the vision for their national team.
A lot of pyramid schemes too.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So there's really it's kind of like a hologram. We have overlapping pyramids that are created, and there's all this talk, especially with a lot of the very righteous things that the women have been doing recently about calling attention to the inequality at the U.S. soccer level and the pay scales and so forth. It's really made you think about, everybody talking about it's a pay-to-play model. Klinsmann had mentioned that, he was like almost befuddled when he finally dug in here in the U.S. when he was technical director, that your pyramid's upside down here. It's supposed to be the other way around. We talked about the DA starting. If there was truly one pyramid for player development, the pathways would be clear. And if there was only one pyramid, the tip of the pyramid you would think is where, sort of, even in this country on a pay-to-play model, the tip of the pyramid would be where the money would be spent the most. Those are the kids that have to travel multiple state on planes to go play these national games, these national championships. And, but because we now have multiple pyramids, and we talked about this in, I think, the Thanksgiving episode, which was the spaghetti sandwich or whatever it's called.
Alphabet soup.
Yeah, alphabet soup. There's so many different national championships. There is actually multiple pyramids. It's like Egypt.
Yeah, but
yes.
A ton of people go to Egypt to see the multiple pyramids. What's wrong with multiple pyramids here?
There's not a clear pathway. What if you spend your entire vacation climbing the one pyramid and you find out the one you wanted to was over there?
And I do want to say that a lot of people have asked me to bring in the professional aspect. We do have to. I think we should tie this into the professional game inevitably, because even if you or you don't think your kid has any plans to go pro or even to college as some of their ambitions, the professional game has sort of waded in now, right? And I've noticed this incredible phenomenon where there, especially in lower level professional soccer, a lot of times clubs aren't actually profitable until they set up a youth operation. So whereas in other countries, the professional team that has gates and maybe TV money if they're at a higher level is funding so many other things. Now it's the opposite here. You have to set up a pay-to-play youth system in order to fund your money-losing professional team. So when you and I think the training compensation solidarity payments conversation that we've had a lot in recent years. We've written about it a lot on the site. I'm sure we'll do I think we have a specialty episode that we've got to do in the next month or two here to give people an update. So MLS is now enforcing, or says they're seeking, training compensation and solidarity payments when their players go abroad. However, there's still none of that. Like the U.S. Soccer Federation somehow, bafflingly to me, says they're going to stay out of it. They don't want to be involved, but they're going to let MLS do what they want to do. But then so we have this partial reward system where an MLS club can collect money, thousands or even millions of dollars in some cases, in the big cases, for growing a player that has value on the international market. But if the local community club sends players on to MLS,
Crossfire Premier and DeAndre Edlin.
Another great example. I mean, we've had the reward system. We're starting to get it partially, but we still can't open up our gaze and our understanding broadly enough to recognize that it needs to be universal.
So, U.S. Soccer. I mean, again, why not? Like, where is the leadership there? Like, why won't they? I think that if it was very, very clear that small town club FC could spend time with a player that they had from 10 years old through 13 years old, and they sign even a professional contract in MLS, but would get some kind of compensation for that, it might change their focus on what they're trying to do for how they develop their players. So the measure of success for player development for all coaches would be not we had X number of players get college scholarship, but we had X number of players go professional. And that would be, for me, a game changer to make people realize what does it take to be a professional player, because the attributes for that are a lot different than what it takes to be a successful college player.
Wrapping all this up, wouldn't it be interesting, Chris, you're talking about there's multiple pyramids right now at the youth level, player development pyramids. Wouldn't it be interesting if U.S. Soccer just categorized and the same way they do with pro leagues, where you have a first division, second division, and they're actually labeling the pro leagues with MLS being the first, USL being the second, and then you have third tier leagues. What if they did that on the youth side and they actually, everybody got a stamp, almost like the USDA, A, B, C, D, just like with coaching licenses, you have different tiers that actually define, versus with a lot of marketing now, every youth league says they're the best or they're this or that or they're elite. If you actually had an outside body, categorizing those leagues, that could bring a lot more transparency.
And that seems the system, this messy, chaotic, capitalist, open market thing that's grown up in youth soccer needs that. My fear is that the federation would have been the obvious entity to come in and do that. Instead, they came in and just started their own league, and now they're just another acronym.
I think that's what
in
they
the
were trying to
alphabet
do.
soup.
Part of my answer,
why, but
they thought, and they still think, having their own league is the answer. We'll have our own league. It'll be the best. And because it's the best, everybody else is going to have to find their place in the pyramid.
But that's not solving
below.
the problem. That's just carving out your own little fiefdom on the problem. That's sidestepping the fundamental stuff that we're talking about here. So,
but here's what I love about the DA though, and full transparency, I call games for the DA. I work closely with the DA, so obviously I'm going to be a bit more pro DA. But here's what I do love about the DA. Okay, I still think that you need that sort of fiefdom. You need that 1% league at the top, and they have it in Europe. It's called the kids that play in the AC Milan Youth Academy, the Inter Milan Youth Academy, the Manchester United Academy. You need that little fiefdom because you know what? There is 1% of kids, whether their parents like it or not, whether they like it or not, whether it's going to change or not, who at 12, 13 years old have it in their head that this is the life for me and this is what I want. Now, putting aside all the pay-to-play things and everything, if you're talking just about kids who have this and they want this, they need to go into a professionalized league because they need to learn what the mentality is of a pro player. They need to see the life of a pro player. Do they need to be living it at 12, 13, 14? No, but they need to understand what it is and what they're getting themselves into. And as they get older and as they get closer to the first team, they are going to have to embed themselves in that type of lifestyle. And so therefore, I think one of the best things about the Development Academy, whether you like it or not, whether people think it's affordable or not, which let's forget, all but a few, if not only one, MLS academies are now fully funded, all but two. Thank you, Charles. You have kids who are saying, you know what, this is what I want by hell or high water, and this is what I'm going to devote my life to. And that's great. It gives them direction, and it gives them something to learn. You know, when I was 15, and God bless me, I was a terrible player who thought I was great. But when I was 15, I thought I had a chance to go pro. I thought I was good enough. And I had other friends who actually were good enough to go pro. And at 17, 18, they went over and they saw the lifestyle. And boom, it was this big life-changing wake-up call for them where they saw what life was like going to like Germany or somewhere, being alone, not knowing the language, having to wake up every day, live, breathe, eat soccer, and then go to sleep, wake up, train again, have people in your face all the time, deal with that pressure, and they couldn't handle it. By having our kids learning what that is at 12 and 13, just for that 1% who wants it more than anything or who thinks that they want it, then I think that that's great for them because when they do go to Germany or they step up to MLS, they're not going to be surprised. They know what the mindset is. They know the mentality they have to have. And even if they don't make it, they still usually get a college soccer scholarship or they get to go somewhere with those lessons that they've learned in a professional-like mentality. So yes, there's a lot of ways in which people have taken advantage of the professionalism. There are a lot of ways in which it has disenfranchised players and coaches and pundits as well, and according to Charles' timeline, parents too. But I think in some ways, where it's needed in certain spots in the development path for those who really want it, those kind of leagues are essential.
I still just think we're still talking about trying to implement a model from another country where it doesn't make sense here, because AC Milan has multiple professional clubs within an hour's drive or 2 hours drive. In our case, we've said, well, if you're going to be an MLS academy, you've got to fly halfway across the country.
That's a great point. Fair.
And I think we're spending so much time and money on just getting to the games, much less what all that time that could be spent. Think of the time your kid's in the car, the technical work they could be doing instead. And I think that shows in the style of play and the quality of play. And I wanted to close out the segment. I know we've gone on a while here, but I love getting this idea from Livy Mascaro, a coach on Twitter, who pointed out that most clubs are run by men and their egos and who can make the most money. There are no cultures being created, no life lessons being taught. Why are we forcing 10-year-olds to specialize in one sport and monopolizing their time? I love this. I love this idea. Like, it's still an ego-driven pursuit. Whether it's the parents' egos, the coaches' egos, in some case even the kids' egos who don't get the reality check they need until it's way too late in their personal cycle.
That's a great segue topic. It's literally what I was going to try and close out with. It comes right into that. Is, we professionalized all this, and we've even spent time in this segment talking so much about what it takes to play at the top level. And I think, again, geography aside, I would love to see a professional tier to the DA, at least on the boys' side, because there's enough professional clubs now with MLS and USL together. Regionalize it if you have to. You shouldn't have to fly across the Mississippi from the East Coast to play good soccer games. You just yes, you might want to find out who the national champion is, but leave it at the top 4 or something. But let's just make that smaller. But the fear is, or what seems to be happening is, if the whole model of the professionalization of soccer is that it has to be professional, then that's where you have these kids that have, like you when you were 15, Mark, have no business. They can dream to be professional, but if every youth club that has an FC in their name thinks they're trying to develop, all 60 kids in their age group to be professionals, and they treat it that way, and they use that as a justification to pay coaches and pay for more marketing and, spend all this money. If clubs with 2,000 players have 200 of them that are travel players, but they're spending half their budget or more on the coaches instead of on scholarshiping the other 1,800 kids so they have opportunities to play in their community, we've lost the plot. So I wish that there would be, I wish we were smaller. I wish, we were like the UK where the FA ran everything, which that's no longer the case anymore. So they're starting to have the same problems we are. There should be a very clear pathway. I would love the listeners to be more active. I know we're getting a lot more listeners, but I would love for the people who are, if you're listening to this, you're one of the early adopters and you really care about this topic. We want to hear from your ideas. What's wrong? Charlie, you got a ton of great DMs. You have probably more Twitter followers than we have at SoccerWire. I have 18 Twitter followers. I just started my account, like a month before we started the podcast. Finally. But
not the only reason you only have 18.
Yeah, I know. I used to have 1,000. I lost them all because of something I said. Okay. So I just would love to see the old ODP model back, but with like the federation totally staffing it and spending some of their $100 million surplus, put 2 good men and 2 good women in each state and make it their job to find the best players in that state, bring those players together for some training sessions, bring them together for a tournament against a couple of other states, and have regional national team pools that are decided by a committee of those people. Like, let's just cut out relying on all these spider webs of possibly nepotism or cronyism or whatever other ism you want to put in there, and just let the free market work, because we can't change it in this country, but clarify the player pathway. And then maybe we could reduce back to one pyramid, which would reduce the overall cost.
I was discouraged to learn that pay to play is no longer doesn't live alone. We know that sort of dirty word, but now pay to stay is a thing now. So there's now a new industry over and above just the funds that come from playing soccer. There's now a cottage industry of hotels and hotel bookings and travel agencies. How many travel agencies are catering to elite sports now, youth sports in this country? There's a few, I think.
Economic impact studies.
And the myriad stories of kickbacks and room nights and all that stuff that gets happened. I mean, we're at this point where you talked about the ODP model. Let's raise kids who never have to cross, in let's say at least half the states, right? Who never have to cross state lines to develop into a top player, to be challenged to
Marcelo
grow.
Balboa's plan back in the day. You wanted to make a rule at the federation that you couldn't play outside of X zip codes from where you are. Imagine how many.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, imagine how many kids would. I mean, I used to coach high school soccer. We had a player on the team who was as a sophomore, had an older brother also. Their family had moved 3 times because the parents were that ego angry about their kids not making the particular sport they played in, and they were moving just so they could get them in another high school. Anyway, that's a tangent. Unbelievable.
The parents have the power to change it. I think we do have. At the end of the day, the parents are the ones who choose to pay for all this excess travel, and they could also choose to just play in local leagues. But right now, for whatever reason, there's so many parents right now who are willing to, fork over thousands of dollars a year and fly all over the country to play glorified rec soccer.
And I urge those parents to go to the meetings, go to the board meetings, read the minutes, look up. There's a good chance your club is a nonprofit, which means there's transparency in tax filings of who gets paid what and where the money goes. Go look it up, get involved, because it can be boring, but it's very necessary.
Well, I really like that term, state of play. I don't know how I got to play at some of the highest levels, but I can tell you that the Serber soccer fields out in Maryland are absolutely gorgeous. You took the words right out of my mouth a bit earlier, Chris Hummer. We would love to hear your feedback, especially on a topic such as this that can be a bit contentious. So please tweet us at the SoccerWire. And if you have any angry tweets for us, what's your Twitter handle, Charles?
Yes, at Boehm.
That's
hit
where
me
to
with
send
your hate tweets. I'll take that.
Yeah, your angry tweets. So that will do it for this, but we would love to continue the conversation outside of this podcast at the SoccerWire. You can also email us at news@soccerwire.com, and we will definitely share some of the best responses on the air throughout later podcasts. We have to take another break, but when we return, we will be joined by producer and editor extraordinaire Bridget Baker, who will tell us about this week's featured players on SoccerWire, and the famed Chris Hummer will return once again with his segment, Heard on the Wire. SoccerWire is the place for prospective recruits to list themselves and promote their profile to thousands of daily readers, including college coaches, scouts, and more. All recruits can list themselves for life for a small one-time fee. Already committed? Congratulations! All commitments can be reported for free and are included in our nationwide soccer recruiting and tournament wire to over 65,000 people each Thursday. Visit SoccerWire.com to create your player profile today. Welcome back to the weekly SoccerWire podcast. It's December 4th, 2019, and this is our 10th episode. Can you guys believe we are now in double digits? And I am joined by producer Bridget Baker, who's here to tell us all about the most recent featured players on SoccerWire.
Thanks, Mark. We have 2 new featured players on SoccerWire this week. Shania Spriggs, a defender and midfielder playing for the Georgia club Concord Fire Soccer Club. She's playing in the ECNL and will graduate with the class of 2023. And Connor Braun, a midfielder and forward playing for Arlington Soccer Association, playing in one of our partners leagues, the Club Champions League, is a graduate in the class of 2022. And both of these players' profiles, highlight videos, along with their bios, can be found on SoccerWire.com.
Thank you, Bridget, and we're rooting for you too, as well as everyone who is looking to take the next step, not only in their soccer careers, but their academic ones as well. We now turn our attention over to the man who made this all possible, the founder of SoccerWire, the one, the only, Chris Hummer, for the triumphant return of his segment, Heard on the Wire. Don Hummer, what have you heard on the wire at the beginning of this holiday season?
Well, you've added one that you're going to hear next time if you keep giving me these many accolades, because it's really not my personality. Logos and branding is some of the things we've been hearing on the wire. And for those of you MLS fans out there or USL fans, there's been two, I guess you could say, Madison Avenue would turn over in their grave if they saw these things going on. So these billionaires or 100 millionaires keep buying these sports teams and deciding that they need to wipe slates clean with old history. And the Tulsa Roughnecks, which has been around for decades as a brand name, have changed their name to FC Tulsa. I don't know how many marketing studies it took to figure that out, but it's really not necessary, and I'm sure a lot of the fans are pretty upset. It's more in Bridget's neighborhood neck of the woods out there in Oklahoma, though, right? No?
She's shaking her head. She's like, no, this is not.
My team's rebrand was successful, thank you. Sporting KC did good with their rebrand.
Sporting KC did good with the rebrand, she said, for those that didn't hear it. But Tottenham needs a rebrand, though. All right, so if you thought that was bad,
their logo's great though. I'll say I agree with you about Tulsa FC, but their logo is fire, and I know where you're going with the next one, and it's certainly not fire. But go on.
Yes, but it's from the Chicago Fire, and it has got to be. I mean, basically, pick a 7th grader in art class to use a generic font and come up with a to give them 2 minutes to make a logo, and you're going to find the one that the new owners of Chicago Fire come up with their logo. And they even outsourced it to Brooklyn, New York, instead of finding somebody good in Chicago. You guys, if you haven't
Brooklyn
seen it
just
yet,
ruins everything.
Biggie
Bunch of
Smalls.
hipsters out there.
So just if you haven't seen it yet, you got to go. I think it's actually a joke. It makes me think of when MLS Houston came. It was Houston 1896ers, 1836ers, which was, it seemed like an historical reference, but it completely pissed off a lot of the local, original inhabitants of that region, because it basically talked about a Revolutionary War that it's like, why would you call history to that? So they at least had the decency, even you could say, to rescind that and fix it right away. So I wonder what the over-under is on days, months, or years that Chicago.
I feel like it's already been days. I think we're into a week or so now.
So is Chicago Fire going to kick a ball in the 2020 MLS season with this logo or not?
I thought I saw that logo on one of the Rorschach tests that I had with my psychologist before coming to make this podcast.
Well, I saw some discussion on Twitter before I actually saw the logo, and my initial thought was, there's a new logo out, which means a lot of people hate the logo, and I thought it was just going to be a bunch of hyperbole. Then I saw the new Chicago Fire logo, and my immediate thought was, they need to fix this. They need to change this as soon as possible. Just own the mistake and change it, because it's terrible. It's maybe the worst I've ever seen.
I think Twitter agreed with you too, Quinn.
Yes, I agreed with Twitter on this one for sure.
All right, so it's not really our wheelhouse talk about that stuff, but it was such a big thing. I just wanted to bring it up. So it was definitely heard on the wire. I guess really the last one is to follow up a conversation from earlier in the episode. We talked a lot about professionalization of soccer, and I just want to make it very clear that if you're having any questions about your organization, that is a very easy way to find out how much revenue they generate. If they're not for profit, which is most youth soccer clubs, there's a very easy way for you to find out how much revenue they generated, how much cash they have in the bank, and what their top key employees are being paid. Usually it's $100,000 or more per year they're forced to list, but some clubs will even list other people. They'll list all their key personnel and show their salaries. Not saying one doesn't deserve $130,000 and somebody else doesn't, but just in the interest of informing yourself, it's really easy to Google. It's called a 990. It's a Form 990. It's required by all not-for-profits to file on an annual basis. Sometimes it takes 18 months to get the full copy up. There's a couple of platforms you can go to, and Google is your friend. Projects.propublica.org is one of the easiest ones. And all you have to do is you can search the word soccer and filter by Pennsylvania. And you will get a list of any not-for-profit with the word soccer in their name in Pennsylvania. You double-click on their 990. It'll show you their revenue from last year, their cash in the bank, and their key staff members and how much they make. No judgment, just empowering the listeners that if you really want to check it out and just, have fun with it, but it could certainly be a rabbit hole you could go down.
Thank you, Chris. And before we let you go, you said you only have 18 Twitter followers. Let's get that number up. Where can we find you on Twitter?
Real Chris Hummer, RealChrisHummer.
And Bridget Baker as well. We know you've got some great content including your awesome dog, Cash.
I was going to get real angry if Chris got to do a plug for his Twitter and I didn't get to do one for mine. Yes, you can follow me at the Bridget Baker. And yes, I post a lot of pictures of my dog, Cash.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That will do it for this week's edition of the SoccerWire podcast. For coverage of everything youth soccer, be sure to check SoccerWire.com, your premier location for the best coverage of the youth game. If there's something we missed or a topic you would like discussed, hit us up on Twitter at @TheSoccerWire or hop over to SoccerWire.com and click on the Contact Us link on the bottom of any page. Every Thursday, we put out our National Soccer Recruiting and Tournament Wire, and for those of you in the Mid-Atlantic or Tri-State regions, we send twice weekly local news roundups. Just click on the newsletter link on SoccerWire.com to get the best of SoccerWire in your inbox. And next week, we will be continuing this conversation as we went a bit long today, but we still have a lot that we want to talk about. So we are going to keep going with this conversation and get a bit more in depth with it. But for Quinn Casteel, Charles Boehm, Chris Hummer, and our wonderful producer and editor, Bridget Baker, I'm Marc Serber saying thank you for joining us on the SoccerWire podcast.